Hey guys, I'm Chosen, and I'm a game developer. I know this might not be news to some of you, but I think for today's video I need to specify that. As a game developer, I think you can never underestimate how big a project may be, no matter how small it may seem on the surface. And your creative vision may shift as the development goes on. It may in fact shift a lot depending on multiple factors. Maybe you just took a break from a project just to come back and want to try a new direction. Or possibly you don't like how a project was shaping up based on your vision, and want to course correct and tweak it to be more in line with the idea you have in mind for what it could be. Maybe you learn some new tools or methods you want to try employing on this project you have. And all of these can have varying results. Sometimes you can do what you need to fix or change a project to be how you want it to be. Other times it may not be so cut and dry. All manner of things can happen to hinder this. Maybe you just can't shape your new ideas to fit your current build, or even just not being happy with the build in general. There's a good amount of ways to tackle these issues, but one of the ways I want to talk about today is restarting development. Now, I know your mind might have just done a pop shove at hearing me talk about restarting on something you've poured your heart and soul into, but hear me out. I've gone through it before, in fact. If you remember my first devlog, I said this. In terms of development, I already had to start and stop it once. Now, those may have seemed inconsequential, but they were really big things in my development process. Even if I soft restarted on the Game Maker build once. After this restart, I thought things were going pretty smoothly, but then I took a bit of a break from active development, for other reasons. I talked about this in my April Fool's video, but when I came back, I wasn't really happy with the game I had, and I still share that opinion. You're probably wondering if I'm about to announce a restart in active development, and sort of? Not quite in the way you'd think, probably, but I want to redefine a lot of what the game is right now, mainly visually. I'd say I really wasn't happy with how the game was turning out to look in terms of visuals, so I'm scrapping most of the old assets and starting again for a third time on the spriting process at least. I liked a lot of what I had and may try a similar style someday, but this 16-bit style was far too restrictive for me to be content with what I have, and if I'm being completely honest. I'm still going to be using pixel art, don't worry, just maybe in a different way, probably 24 bits. A good famous example of this is Enter the Gungeon's artistic style. I might go for something similar to that. Soft restarting my game in this way was definitely a hard decision, but I know it will make me happier with the final result whenever that comes. Sometimes an outside perspective can help. My desire to change things about my build was also brought on by some feedback I received in a comment I received on my third devlog. A viewer expressed some constructive criticism on how my art direction, specifically spriting, was shaping up. In it, they said I should change how the arms and legs appear due to how strange I made the outlines appear when contrasted to the background, suggesting I look at more arcade-esque games for guidance. And I think taking criticism in this regard is completely okay and healthy when it's constructive. Feedback in others can always be a great force to help you move forward in a way that makes everyone happy. You know, originally when I was still actively in development, I had said on this comment that I would be respriting for later. But after coming back from my break, I realized I should definitely get on it as soon as possible for the best possible results. You know, restarts in development can actually be more common than you might think in the wider games industry. A famous example is Metroid Prime 4. The game was announced in E3 of 2017, and radio silence. This went on for a while until January of 2019. Jesus Christ, we Metroid fans really are patient. Nintendo released a video titled Development Update on Metroid Prime 4 for Nintendo Switch. In a statement from Shinya Takahashi, Senior Managing Executive Officer at Nintendo, he said that the current development progress has not reached the standards we seek in a sequel to the Metroid Prime series. He then went on to say that upon consideration, had decided to restart the game's development despite knowing it would disappoint many fans. In the statement, he elaborated on how much the team wanted to live up to the standards of quality and how if they weren't satisfied with the quality that they were creating, then they can't confidently deliver a game that will meet the expectations of the players. The Resident Evil series has had quite a few run-ins with situations like these. Resident Evil 2 was very near complete build 3 months before the planned 1997 release, but supervisor I'm really bad with names. Yoshiki Okamoto wasn't happy with the story or the bright visuals of the game as a sequel to the original Resident Evil. So with director Hideki Kamiya and producer Shinji Makima, Okamoto decided to cancel this version of the game and start on a new Resident Evil 2, which reworked the characters, game mechanics, and environment designs. This is the game we now know as Resident Evil 2, released in 1998. Resident Evil 4 Remake recently released, but if we look back to the original version of the game, it also went through a multitude of completely different builds. Originally, Resident Evil 2 director Hideki Kamiya had come back to direct the game, but realized he had started making a very action-heavy game, which eventually morphed into Devil May Cry after he decided this build did not fit into the survival horror genre. But Capcom still wanted an RE4, so they continued the project, later showing off the Hookman build at E3 2000, which was iterated on alongside several other builds before Kamiya eventually came back to the director chair, delivering us the game we now know as Resident Evil 4. A good example of a large visual and thematic restart is the transition from Team Fortress Classic to Team Fortress 2, but it had a lot behind the scenes too. In an interview, marketing director Doug Lombardi said, "The military theme is, I think, distracted from it, and the uniqueness of the different roles." After being picked up by Valve for their modding skills, Robin Walker and his gang were working on a sequel to Team Fortress. Looking at this late 2000 GameSpot interview and the research, it's hard to imagine a time where people saw this to be in line with Team Fortress's sequel. There's more to it than meets the eye. Robin originally said it was more of a pet project that they had all the details outlined for. Again, this interview is riddled with all sorts of cut features lost with the change in direction, things like classes, new gameplay mechanics, the list goes on. Oh dear lord, they talked about the bots. He gave an estimated release of 2005. The game released on October 10th, 2007. In another interview later, Robin said that they had built around 3 or 4 games named TF2 internally. A leak in 2003 that revealed Half-Life 2 also revealed information on a TF2 build that was invasion-based, a concept of aliens invading humans? Not too sure about this one. The cutting room floor article is pretty empty. Only 2 models were ever found, being the model for a human and an alien commando. Source code mentioned things unseen in today's TF2, like drivable vehicles, an energy shield that would affect the strength of your weapons, and some sort of plasma rifle. This build was later scrapped in favor of what we now know today as Team Fortress 2. Your mother! Banjo Kazooie is a great example of a large directional shift. Originally named Project Dream, an isometric RPG on the SNES, announced in 1995, it originally focused on a completely different protagonist. Upon moving to the N64, the team made a lot of changes, from a young boy as the main character to a rabbit and then finally a bear. Banjo, being an RPG, was dropped in favor of a 2.5D platformer, but then they saw Mario 64. Everyone knows the large impact Mario 64 had on game developers at the time. Unlike Bubsy, Rare had the time to change their new game to be the prolific collectathon platformer that we now know today. A few games later, they would change their vision from a classical 3D platformer to a laughingstock. The restarting of a game's development can be synonymous with development hell for many, and you'll be right in that assumption in many cases. During Bioshock Infinite's troubled development, one of the developers stated that a whole 4 games of content had been cut. Ken Levine is an infamously not very easy guy to work with. It's recently outlined by how his current project is stuck in development hell of its own. But if we go back to the development of Infinite, the game had apparently gone through several drafts and fundamental changes before the August of 2010 reveal, with the team reportedly relieved that Levine wouldn't be able to fundamentally change the game anymore after the reveal. This was short-lived, as afterward the game still went through all manner of changes. An entire multi that was to help the game be more evergreen was cut entirely. Bill Gardner, who was helping lead the multiplayer team, said, "Spend a lot of time putting your heart and soul into something just to have it disappear in the span of a meeting. You never really get over that." In 2011, some demos were released. Next to none of the content seen in these demos made it to the final product. The game was delayed several times, and senior developers were quitting because of Ken Levine's difficulty to work with. Irrational brought in Don Roy, a reported veteran producer in the industry with experience closing out big publishers. I tried to research him further, but I couldn't find much on him, so take that veteran claim with a grain of salt. That's just what my research told me, sources in the description. But even this guy was shocked to see just how bad things had gotten. If you want me to go more in depth with the troubled development of Bioshock Infinite, let me know in the comments, because I could make a whole ass video on this rabbit hole. This game's development cycle is hell to look at. So suffice it to say, the game released to widespread critical acclaim, but as the years went on, people became increasingly more critical on it, especially the story, leading it to be in a bit of a weird spot with admittedly half-baked mechanics that were clearly meant to be something more. You know, I've also gone through situations similar to these recently. In my Splatoon 3 video on extra work, at the end I teased this new ice fishing game I've been working on. This was a game I was working on over spring break, so I made a pretty great deal of progress. I made a character, got a title screen art from my wonderful girlfriend, and was on track to finish relatively soon. But I took a small break from the project during a school week and came back to realize I really didn't like how the game had turned out visually. And more importantly, I got a new idea for the gameplay. Instead of a strange fishing simulator combined with Undertale, I would make it a roguelike about diving in to fight the fish in some way. So I decided to redo the visuals and have started pursuing the idea. Now, I make no guarantee this game will release, but I thought it might be a good way to learn more about GameMaker programming. And I have, it's definitely been a good experience. I went from 32 bits to 24 bits as mentioned earlier, and redesigned everything to fit it. I decided to scrap this shop, this old fishing hole design, and an unfinished shop system now based on the scrapped inventory mechanic and scrapped old museum concept, at least for now. I also scrapped the beautiful title art for the title screen, but might use it somewhere else in the game. I honestly much prefer this version of the game's vision and love the new direction it's taking. I gotta remake the items, main character, create enemies, remake the ice. It's really important, and it's going pretty damn good. You know, there's other content creators that have restarted on their games. Game Maker's Toolkit decided to make a game after years of critiquing and discussing the game design philosophy of many games in the mainstream. The original idea was an attempt to create a playable game within 30 days. He went on to meet this goal and learned a whole lot about developing games for the public in this time span. His game got pretty positive reception, even being played by large developers such as the creators of The End Is Nigh, Room to Grow, Celeste, and It Takes Two. A speedrun was also created, which is very sweet to see. He created a follow-up video addressing the feedback by announcing he was scrapping all of the mechanics and starting again in order to create a better product for his player base. He outlined that this feedback had shown him some of the errors and fundamentals of the game's design. Things like controlling the character, how the aiming was too complicated, and the lack of proper accessibility settings. In this response video, he outlined methods he would attempt to use to remedy the issues with the support of his community. All of the versions he has released are on a niche page in the description below in case you want to try them for yourself. I'll also be linking to his devlog playlist. It is some very interesting stuff, admittedly. In Ludum Dare 46, a man by the name of Benbach created a humble little build for a game called Slimekeep. It started off as a score-based survival game where the player fires upon an ever-growing wave of slimes. The premise being that the longer you leave the slimes alive, the stronger they get. After the Ludum Dare build, he decided to go back and fix, tweak, and fine-tune it. He later realized he wanted to change how the game was to an almost fundamental level. Instead of surviving this big square room against the ever-spawning slimes, you would be moving through rooms in a roguelike top-down shooter. This game now has a Steam page and is slated for a 2023 release. In his devlogs, he shows the whole process of iterating upon this idea, adding and changing weapons, enemies, making resprites, and more. A good example of this process is when he created a boss fight and it received negative feedback, so he decided to overhaul it in the next devlog. Also, gambling. That's just two examples of some cool restarts or shifts in the direction on this platform we all make stuff on together. But I'm sure there's plenty more you can find if you look hard enough. So what's the conclusion of all this? Well, obviously, you should try to take your time on starting a game and at least go in with a defined direction. Know what you want to make before committing to development. But at the same time, it's never too late to say you're not liking how something is turning out. A restart can be just what you might want to get back to the best production you can make. Of course, on the other side of the coin, as we've seen, changing your idea too much can lead to consequences in development and a half-baked finished product. And this can really go with any medium: video production, art, the list goes on. It's never too late for a fresh start if it means you'll be better with the final product. And that's the video. Thanks for watching. This is a new sort of video essay style I've wanted to try for a while now, and it's been a really fun and interesting experiment. And I meant what I said earlier. If you want to see me talk in depth about the Bioshock Infinite development of video or any other game, let me know with a comment down below. Be sure to like if you like this video. Can't say when the next one will come out, but it won't be too long from now. I have a Patreon if you want to support me. Any little bit is always appreciated. You can be shown at the end of future videos or get 9 to things like my game development efforts. And as always, please do be sure to subscribe. It helps the channel a lot and will let you see new videos first if you turn on notifications. I even have a pretty cool Discord you can join if you want to get even more updates and even talk to me or other people that you enjoy being around. And also, thanks for watching.